Hello and welcome. We are going to get started here. Very excited to see all of you, all your names. Um, Today's webinar is called Ask a Polish Researcher, and we will hear from our presenter, Aleksander Zawilski. And I'm going to let our president of the PGSA, Robert Pine, in just a moment introduce him. But before I do that, really quickly, I wanted to draw everybody's attention. It should be to the top right of your screen. You will see like a little person symbol, as well as a chat symbol next to that one. If you have questions, if you would go ahead and type them in the chat, just remember that these questions need to be very specific, not tailored specifically to you, but very general, specific to asking a Polish researcher just general questions about genealogy. And if we can, we will take these chat questions and send them to Aleksander after the webinar so that he might be able to answer some of those for you. So that's the chat button. It's the second button to the right on your right-hand side of your screen at the top. To the right of that is a little question box. That can also be a place for questions. Chat is easier. Everybody can see that, and it will be easier to get them from there, but you can also post them there. And finally, the other button, most important to us, is the paper with the paper clip on it. It's the second one from the far right, and it's called Materials. And if you click on that one, you'll find our handout for this presentation, as well as the PDF of the actual slides that Aleksander will be using today, so that you can follow along. So I hope you enjoyed this webinar. I'm going to hand it over to our president, Robert Pine, and we'll go from there.
Hello, everyone. This is Robert Pine, president of the Polish Genealogical Society of America. And today I am very pleased to introduce Aleksander Zawilski, our expert on this Ask a Polish Researcher webinar, our last webinar for 2025. Aleksander is a research and tour manager at our partners PolishOrigins, with whom we've had a great working relationship for a good number of years. He oversees the company's genealogy research projects and tours. Plus, he personally carries out selected investigations, blending archival expertise with field experience to help people to rediscover and reconnect with their family history. Our questions are divided into 4 categories. Our first category covers practical guidance. So, Aleksander, welcome, and are you ready for the first question?
Hi, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here again. Yes, we have about 19 questions, and so there will be quite a lot to go through. There will be fairly uncomplicated, mostly Genealogy 101, so you can see how we work, or if you're not sure where to start, we'll do our best to show you how we work and how can you start your genealogy adventure. Yes, we can proceed with the questions.
Excellent. So, first question, a good basic question. I'm not sure where to start, so can you recommend guides, books, or online forums specifically for Polish research?
So when it comes to forums, we have one on our website. There are new posts every day with our users discussing their research cases with the rest of our community there. The forum is organized into clear subsections, including research in Poland, searching for relatives, surname origins, traveling to Poland, and much more. So you can register and post your questions there. There are over 11,000 users there, so someone will definitely be able to help you. We also offer the Polish Genealogy Academy on our website. It contains a collection of videos that explain how to begin your research, find and translate documents, and understand the basics of genealogy research. The goal is to make the process clearer and more approachable, giving you the knowledge you need to continue your own discoveries. Some of the videos are free, Some require a payment of around $20. Several of the free videos can also be found on our YouTube channel. There are also many helpful materials, of course, available on the PGSA website. So I think Robert may want to mention those as well.
Yes, thanks. Besides the general links and data that we have, if you've never done it, you might want to visit the PGSA store from the homepage. It can be accessed through our website, as I say, through the homepage. It offers a number of very helpful books, CDs, and guides from basic to very advanced research capabilities and information. A few examples. A good handbook, particularly for when you're doing research in America and sometimes in Poland, is the study of obituaries as a source for Polish genealogical research. It uses the Chicago Polish newspaper from the late 1800s, the Dziennik Chicagowski. It's got images, translations, all kinds of good things dealing with obituaries. Polish parish records of the Roman Catholic Church and their use and understanding in genealogical research. A long title, but a great book, particularly for a beginner or a middle range. It covers a wide variety of topics, has great quick reference materials, everything from important words and translations to alphabets and how-tos and research information. It's something you'll typically have on your desk handy with your workings for the research you're doing. Now, if you get really advanced and you're getting into a lot of other kinds of documents, we have all 4 volumes available from Fred Hoffman, In Their Words. These are very comprehensive books. One is on Polish documents, another one on Latin, a third on German, and a fourth on Russian. So if you're getting into obscure and other kinds of documents or unusual documents or legal documents and so forth, this is a great, great book. It's extremely well known. Lots of libraries have it, but you might want to look at that. And then we have a lot of research packets, and on our website, under the education tab, we have what are and how to segments, which are constantly being built. So let us move on to question 2. What information should a researcher gather before reaching out to archives, parishes, or professional researchers?
Well, we should distinguish between archives and parishes on one hand and professional researchers on the other. So archives and parishes do not conduct extensive research on your behalf. You can only request information about specific records, and in doing so, you should provide complete details such as the full name of the person of interest, the location and approximate date of the event, their religious affiliation, and if possible, the names of their parents. Archives have to provide you with an answer, while getting documents from parish churches is more difficult as they are not obliged to help you and are usually busy with other activities. When working with professional researchers, you should share everything you have already gathered. In addition to the information mentioned above, this may include any family trees you have created, documents such as ship manifests, naturalization papers, or census records, as well as letters or correspondence your family may have received from Polish relatives in past decades. When we receive research inquiries, we always encourage people to share as much information as possible, since even the smallest detail can sometimes lead to a breakthrough.
Super. Okay, next. What are the best Polish websites and databases for genealogy research?
Well, there's a lot of information about this on the PGSA website, so I think Bob might want to cover this himself. I will talk more about specific tools and websites later down the line in the presentation.
Oh, okay. Yeah, visit our website. You'll notice that if you go to the surname databases, we have a huge collection there. I mean, I could talk for a long time what we have there. One of the things I would recommend is on our homepage, regularly you should take a look at news and updates. So far this year, we've put up 53 editions of databases, additions to the education system, and section, links to archives, libraries, researchers, map collections. Visit our website, cruise through it. You'll find a lot of good things out there, not only for Poland, but also the Kreshy areas of Old Poland and the Commonwealth. So there are also some tabs there for Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine, and even some Russian that we've been able to find. So I recommend everyone just go out there and surf our site. Okay, number 4. Are there special sources or approaches to track the route my ancestors took to arrive in America? And by this, possibly create a map to show the route each took, the migration paths, maybe finding passport or citizenship records, boat manifests, and so forth.
Yes, although the first stage of your ancestors' journey is the most difficult to trace and sometimes impossible to document. So let's assume that your ancestors emigrated between 1880 and 1914, which was the peak period of migration from Poland. If they left legally, they were required to apply for a passport and an immigration permit. The process always began locally at the commune office or police station, and then moved to the county or governorate level. As a result, such documents were issued by the administrative seats of local counties or provinces. Such applications for passports and immigration permits are stored in the Polish state archives. It is worth noting, however, that researching these materials can take days or even weeks, since the registers cover all applications from a given county rather than a single town, and the relevant years may not always be available. Also, these records are not available online, are often incomplete, and may not be available for the locations or time periods that interest you. Also, there is no guarantee that your ancestor applied for a passport or immigration permit. Some people migrated illegally. So your ancestors most likely departed from the German ports of Hamburg or Bremen, traveling there by train. Depending on which part of Poland they came from, they may have first passed through Warsaw, Kraków, Lwów, or Poznań, then continued on to Berlin, Hanover, or Breslau, today's Wrocław, before finally reaching the port cities on the German coast. In these cities, special migrant hostels were established for immigrants from across Europe. These hostels issued registration cards, so-called Meldekarten, some of which have survived and are held at the Hamburg State Archives, Germany. Bremen kept similar records, although far fewer of them remain today. Researching this stage of the journey is challenging and time-consuming, with no guarantee that documents related to your ancestors have survived. The final part of the voyage, however, is much easier to study. Both the departure and arrival ports, such as Hamburg or New York, kept detailed passenger lists. Departure manifests usually recorded the emigrants' names, ages, hometowns, and occupations. Upon arrival, U.S. immigration official produced entry manifests that included information such as health status, literacy, and local contacts. Together, these records document both ends of an immigrant's journey. Also, websites such as Ancestry, Family Search, and the Ellis Island Foundation provide access to these records. Ancestry and Family Search also host many collections from the U.S. National Archives, which are invaluable for tracing migration paths. In addition to passenger lists, they offer naturalization papers, census records, and other documents. Their websites also include guides, historical background, and detailed explanations of available collections. So for anyone beginning to trace their ancestors' migration, visiting the National Archives and Records Administration website is highly recommended. Overall, the latter part of the migration is usually easier to reconstruct, while movements within Europe are far more difficult to trace. Following the exact route of a specific ancestors may be impossible, yet the broader migration from Poland to the United States at the turn of the 20th century have been well documented. So studying this wider historical context can help you understand the general experience and conditions of your ancestors' journey.
The next question actually has two parts. How should I start researching my surname, especially if multiple similar names appear across generations and records? And in conjunction with that, what naming customs or patterns should researchers be aware when trying to distinguish between families with the same surname?
Personally, I think you should always trace your family name through official documents, especially those issued in Poland, since the spelling may have changed after your ancestors arrived in the United States. The general method is no different from standard genealogical research and involves obtaining vital records or the naturalization records in the US. When conducting your research, remember that name spellings often vary due to language influences and the language in which the records were written. Documents in Latin, German, or Russian may spell names differently. In some cases, names were written phonetically, reflecting how they were pronounced rather than their standard spelling. At the end of the 19th century, the majority of the population in Galicia or the Russian partition were illiterate, so they did not know how to spell their names correctly. So this is also something that needs to be considered. Additionally, gendered forms of surnames were sometimes used. For example, Novak referred to a man, Novakovna to an unmarried woman, and Novakova to a married woman. Over time, surnames also evolved for social or cultural reasons. Some people, for example, added the suffix ski at the end of their name to make their name sound more distinguished or noble. Ultimately, it is important to recognize that multiple versions of the same family name may have existed, and all of them were considered correct within their historic and linguistic context. It is completely normal that different generations of the family had different versions of the name. However, we should distinguish between surnames that evolved and had several legitimate versions of spelling and surnames that are misspelled due to, for example, foreign clerics not knowing how to write them. To check the correct spelling, it is best to verify whether a name with such a spelling exists. There is a great dictionary on Polish surnames written by Fred Hoffman. Robert also mentioned him before, and I think PGSA has it available for purchase on their website, so Robert might want to talk more about it.
Yes, not only do we have Polish surnames, their origins and meanings, but there's also a companion book which does the same thing for Polish first names. And I might add from my own personal research, for example, there's one very simple name in my family, Duis, that depending on whether the writer was writing in or his background was from Latin, Polish, or German, there are at least 6 or 7 different spellings, all of which essentially are pronounced the same way. But everything ties together that I know it's all the same person and the same family. So excellent points made there on how names can be the same but be different. Number 6, what strategies do you recommend for obtaining copies of baptism, marriage, and death records?
Okay, so let's assume that in this scenario, you already know the exact place of birth, marriage, or death, and which parish church issued the records at the time. So the first step that I usually do is to check genealogy databases, such as, for example, Genealogical, which is the largest genealogy database in Poland. Start there to see if the indexes of the records you're looking for are available. In many cases, digital scans of the records are attached to the indexes, making this the quickest and easiest way to locate a document. If the index is listed on the website but no image is provided, the website should still indicate where the original record is stored. Next, you should visit websites that may not have indexes but could still host scans of the records. One of the most important is the official website of the Polish State Archives, szukaj w archiwach.gov.pl. There you can search for the collections of records from the specific parish or locality you're interested in and check if scans are available. This step can be more challenging as records are often written in Latin or Polish, and depending on the region and historical period, sometimes in German or Russian, using a different alphabet. But if you found an index earlier, you should already have the record number, which will make locating the specific entry easier. Another useful resource is Family Search, where many scans are also available to registered users. If you find that access to certain collections is restricted, you can always visit a local LDS Family History Center in the United States where you can view the records on site. I will mention more websites later in the presentation. If no indexes or scans are available online, but you have identified which archive or parish church holds the documents, you can contact them directly by email and request a copy. Contacting archives is generally easier as they are accustomed to such inquiries and are obliged to assist. Parish priests, on the other hand, as I mentioned, can be more difficult to reach as they are often busy and may not check their email often. It's best to write in Polish, and using an automatic translator is perfectly acceptable. If all else fails, you can always contact us and we could carry out the research for you.
Okay, many questions and discussions revolve around things to do, but this question takes the other tact, and an important one. Can you share examples of common pitfalls or mistakes one might make when starting their work in Polish genealogy?
So this is, of course, highly subjective, and probably different researchers might list different examples. But after dealing with hundreds of cases by now, these are the key areas that I would highlight. First, many people do not fully communicate with their relatives about what is already known regarding family roots. It is always best to begin by talking to everyone in the family to see if they know anything, have documents in their family archives, or possess letters from the old country. I have witnessed many cases when finding a trunk of documents and family notes in a relative's attic led to groundbreaking findings that allowed to move the research forward. Then I think many people don't fully exhaust the research opportunities on the American side. Before proceeding with research in Polish documents, it is best to do as much research as possible on your side. This means finding ship manifests of your ancestors' travel, searching for their naturalization records if they became American citizens, finding censuses for their households, and finally searching for their marriage and death records in the US. I would say the vast majority overlook the church copies of the records, obtaining only the civil copies, while church documents often provide more information, but they are, of course, quite difficult to find as you would need to know which church your ancestors attended in the US. Next, I think some people rely solely on online indexes, such as those on Family Search or Genealogical, rather than focusing on obtaining copies of the documents these indexes point to. It is always worth pursuing the document itself, not only as a keepsake, but also because these documents can have more information in them than the indexes. For example, professions, house numbers, or side annotations about the person's events in later life, like changing their name, marrying, or emigrating. Another mistake is that some people do obtain these records but don't obtain full translations of them, which might lead to missing key information that could help you in further research. Relying too much on the spellings of the names and the dates from the American documents can be a mistake as well. First of all, as I've said earlier, surnames evolved, so their spelling might have changed through the decades, and the dates are also very often inaccurate. I have seen many cases when someone's ancestor had an incorrect birth date engraved on their tombstone. Many people, especially in the rural areas, were illiterate back then, as I said, so such mistakes were bound to happen. Also, the American clerics naturally had trouble with spelling Polish names, which led to differences in writing. If possible, narrowing down the correct spelling of the name could potentially help in your research. Once we know the name of an ancestor's birthplace, there is often a problem with pinpointing the exact location on the map. In Poland, as in the US, there are many places that share the same name, so it is crucial to make sure we have identified the correct one. This can be done using some of the gazetteers or mapping tools that I will talk about later on, as well as through online indexes, which often indicate which parish church issued the record. Searching for the location of that parish church can help in confirming the right place. If you don't pinpoint correctly the place your ancestors came from, you will have trouble moving the research forward and will waste a lot of time searching in the wrong direction. A very common mistake and a completely understandable one is to take the name of a large city at face value as the birthplace. Very often immigration documents list a major city in the region as one's birthplace, while the person was actually born in a small nearby village. In such cases, the name of the city usually refers to the province or administrative district, not the exact location. I have seen many examples where Poznań or Vilnius were recorded as birthplaces, but the person was in fact born dozens of miles away. When this happens, it is best to look for additional documents or to check online indexes that might help you narrow it down. As a general rule, when you have several places with the same name listed as birthplace, the smallest one is usually the correct one. Most of the migration came from small towns and villages, and people rarely migrated from large cities. So having Krakow as the birthplace of your great grandfather usually should raise us some suspicions. Not identifying which religion your ancestors practiced can also cause some problems, since most records in Poland were issued by churches. Until 1945, of course, most Poles were Roman Catholic, but Poland was historically multi-ethnic and multi-religious, so your ancestors might have been Lutheran, Greek Catholic, Orthodox, or Jewish, especially if they were not entirely Polish by ethnicity. Many people are not entirely sure about the ethnicity of their ancestors, so doing DNA tests can also help with that. Finally, many people skip researching collateral lines of their family and focus only on direct ancestors. While cousins, aunts, and uncles may not seem as interesting as your great grandfather, their records can help you overcome dead ends. For example, your great uncle's marriage record might state that his father was already deceased, which can give you a clue about your great grandfather's death date. If you do not know the name of your grandmother's parents, finding a marriage or death record of her sister might reveal that information. Researching collateral lines also provides valuable context about your family's life, showing their profession, second marriages, migration patterns, and social status. So these are the key mistakes people make that I think should be highlighted.
Okay, which genealogical records are usually suggested in an application for Polish citizenship, which is something that we get a lot of questions on?
Yeah, we
Recently.
do get a lot of questions like that as well. So the most important thing before starting your search for records, it is important to understand one of the main requirements for obtaining Polish citizenship. You must be able to prove that your ancestors were Polish citizens. And there was no Polish citizenship during the period of the partitions. People born before Poland regained independence were legally Austrian, Russian, German, or Prussian subjects, depending on which partition they lived in. Polish citizenship was established only after World War I, when the country became independent again. The Polish Citizenship Act of 1920 granted citizenship to all individuals who were residing in Poland at that time. Therefore, to prove that your ancestors were Polish citizens, you must provide evidence that they lived in Poland after 1920. There are, however, some exceptions. If your ancestors maintained domicile or property in what became Polish territory after 1920 and were legally recognized as residents, for example, if they were still registered locally or paying taxes, they might have qualified for citizenship even if they were physically living abroad. In such cases, residence, property, or tax records became particularly important. Assuming your ancestors did hold Polish citizenship, the next step is to establish your direct lineage to them through standard genealogical research, such as obtaining birth and marriage records. These documents must clearly connect you to the ancestor who was a Polish citizen. After confirming this link, you need to collect documents proving their Polish citizenship, which may include Polish passports or ID cards and applications for them, military service records, residency and property registers, voter lists, or school and employment records. It is also essential to confirm that your ancestors did not lose their Polish citizenship. For example, before 1951, serving as a public functionary such as a policeman, postman, clerk, priest, or soldier, with the exception of World War II service in the Allied armies, would result in losing citizenship. If your ancestor naturalized as a foreign citizen, they also lost Polish citizenship unless they were of military age. Wives and children under the age of 18 were losing Polish citizenship together with their husband or father. There were also some other ways to lose citizenship, and the rules vary depending on the period. Therefore, before beginning your search, it is highly recommended to consult an attorney who specializes in Polish citizenship to confirm that you are eligible and to receive guidance on how to proceed with your application.
Yes, and the 1920 date is very important from a citizenship point of view, and probably almost everyone out there is wondering, well, how does it apply to me? Because my grandparents, great-grandparents, et cetera, came over, in the 1800s or early 1900s. A second route is by presidential decree, which is much more difficult, but is accomplishable. What I'd recommend for more information is, again, go to our website and underneath the Education tab, look for the data found under the notation, how to obtain Polish or Lithuanian citizenship. There are references to government sites. There's an excellent question and answer flow chart that can be very helpful to round things out in terms of what approach you might want to take. Okay, moving on to our section number 2, archives and records. Our first question in this section is, what types of archives or institutions in Poland usually hold parish and or civil records?
Okay, we had also a question about.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
What are your suggestions for seeking family, living family in Ancestral Village?
I was wondering why did I put searching for relatives in the archives section. Okay. So usually visiting the village in person is the best way to begin. Before doing so, it helps to gather as much information as possible about your ancestors' collateral lines of those who remained in Poland, and collect any details you can about their marriages, deaths, children, and later generations. The more recent the information, the better. Many people don't know much about their family history back into the 19th century, unless they're, of course, interested in genealogy research. So recent information will be much more helpful. If you have any information on the date and place of death of relatives from those collateral lines in 20th century Poland, it may be possible to locate their graves. Usually a grave has a guardian who pays for the grave plot and tends to the grave, and the cemetery administration can assist in finding them. These people are usually related to those buried in the grave, so finding them might lead to finding relatives. Although privacy laws apply, they may be able to contact the caretaker on your behalf. You can also leave a note at your relatives' graves for future family members who might visit the grave to find it and read your note. During a visit to the village, we always speak with local residents in hopes of discovering more about one's relatives. So most of the work is just knocking on people's doors and asking around. The smaller the village and the older the person we talk to, the greater the chance of finding useful information. Sometimes local priests, the village mayors, or community centers also help in the search. When it comes to research in former Galicia, the Austrian partition, vital records usually list house numbers, which combined with research in cadastral maps and landholders' records can lead to pinpointing the position of these households on modern maps. Very often, relatives still live on the same land plots your ancestors did. If visiting the village is not possible, you could hire us to do it for you. Alternatively, you can reach out directly to local institutions by email or look for social media pages dedicated to your ancestral village and ask them to help.
Yes, and I can attest to that. I had a couple of letters from the 1920s for part of my family, which the return address had the town. I had visited that town.
Yeah, well, having addresses on envelopes is, the easiest way. If you have those, just visit these addresses, and yeah, that helps.
Yeah. Of course, in the 1920s, it was just Lubiehovo. those
Yeah,
freeway.
yeah, not always street numbers. Yes,
and that could have changed. But I spoke with the priest, and he was very excited that someone came from Chicago, and he was able to contact a family that he thought would be related to me. And it turned out that yes, and we were connected through our great-great-grandmother, whose children left to the United States at that time 125 years ago. So even with a century and a quarter of time passing by, the parish priest was able to assist in putting me together with cousins. Okay, now we move on to archives and records. And what type of archives and records hold both parish and civil documents?
Okay, so in Poland, four main types of institutions preserve parish and civil records. We should distinguish between parish records and civil records. For most of the time, we are dealing with parish records, as civil records before 1945 were issued only in specific regions during specific time periods. For example, in the German partition from 1874, or in the Duchy of Warsaw and parts of the Russian partition between 1808 and 1825. So the first institution, the state archives, are the most popular and accessible repositories for genealogical research. They serve as the primary custodians of Poland's historical documents, including both civil registration records and parish registers that have been transferred from local offices or churches. Generally, the archives hold materials that are over 100 years old. Many of these collections have been digitized and made available through the national portal Szukaj w Archiwach, which allows users to browse scanned registers and inventories from across the country. State archives store both the parish records and the civil records. Then we have church archives, such as archdiocesan and diocesan archives, which preserve parish records that have not been transferred to state institutions. Unlike the state archives, these church archives rarely provide online access, and research typically requires an in-person visit. Some offer limited search services for a fee. Access is often more restricted, as many are open only on certain weekdays and close for extended summer breaks. Still, they remain a valuable source. Many have their own websites with inventories or guidelines for visitors. Prominent examples include the archdiocesan or diocesan archives in Poznań, Kraków, Przemyśl, Pelplin, Gniezno, or Białystok. Then you have the civil registry offices, which maintain more recent vital records. By law, they keep birth records younger than 100 years old and marriage and death records younger than 80 years old before transferring them to the state archives. However, in practice, particularly in Galicia, records are sometimes held longer. For example, if a single book of records covers several decades, it is transferred only when privacy laws no longer protect the final year it contains. So if there is a book of birth records from 1890 to 1930, it will be moved to the archive only in 2030, and often a couple of years later due to bureaucracy. As a result, many offices in former Galicia still hold birth records from the 1890s. Access to registry records is restricted to direct descendants or legal heirs due to privacy regulations. You can write to registry offices by email, although it is best to do so in Polish. An automatic translation will work just fine. To determine which registry office holds a given record, check which commune, gmina in Polish, your ancestral village or parish seat belongs to today, as each gmina has its own registry office. To obtain records from the office, you should be prepared to provide documentation linking you to the person of interest, proving that you are related, although usually when you can inquire first whether they have such a record, you don't need to provide this documentation yet, only when they confirm they have it and then you want to obtain it. Finally, parish churches themselves often store the original copies of records that have not yet been moved to any archives or will never be moved to any archives. These are generally the most challenging to access. Parish priests are under no obligation to assist with genealogical research, and gaining access usually requires direct communication and negotiation with the priest. If permission is granted to view the registers in person, visits are typically limited to 1 or 2 hours, so also not enough time to conduct serious research. Occasionally, an email inquiry may result in receiving digital copies of the requested entries. However, it is not uncommon to receive no reply at all. To sum up, the oldest records are usually kept in parish churches and church archives. 19th century and early 20th century records are commonly found in the state archives or church archives, and records younger than that are preserved by civil registry offices. Together, these institutions form the backbone of genealogical research in Poland.
Closely related to that, how do I determine which institution issued vital records for my ancestors' town?
The most useful source, at least for me, is often Słownik Geograficzny Królestwa Polskiego i Krajów Słowiańskich, the Geographical Dictionary of the Kingdom of Poland and other Slavic countries. Among historical, social, and economic information, this late 19th century gazetteer typically notes the parish church to which local residents belonged. Where when inhabitants practiced different faiths, it often listed Catholic, Lutheran, or Greek Catholic parish churches separately. My approach is to begin simply by checking the Wikipedia page for the town I'm interested in. So the Polish version often includes a footnote at the bottom of the page, linking directly to the entry for that place in the dictionary. If there is no such footnote, you can access the Gazetteer directly and search for the place you are looking for using its internal search engine. The Gazetteer is written in Polish and in narrative form, which can make it challenging to read, but one should look for the word parafia, or the abbreviation PAR, to find the seat of the parish church. Since many places in Poland share the same name, you can expect multiple entries. They are grouped by region, so locations in Ukraine, Lithuania, or the Russian and Austrian partitions appear in separate paragraphs. If you have no lead about the general geographical location of the place of your interest, it might be necessary to check records or indexes from all the places of that name. Another useful gazetteer is the Skorowic Miejscowości Rzeczpospolitej Polskiej, the Index of Localities of the Republic of Poland, also known as the Skorowic Bystrzyckiego, from the name of the author. This directory, published in the 1930s, lists localities in Poland along with the religious institutions that issued vital records for them. Its tabular layout makes it easier to read and interpret. Keep in mind, however, that conditions in the 1930s may not reflect those of the late 19th century, which is probably the period that interests you most, as some new parishes might have been established since then that took over the responsibilities of the previous parishes that issued records for your ancestral place. For places in the former German partition or areas that belonged to Germany before the post-World War II border changes, you can use Kartenmeister. This website provides information about which Catholic or Lutheran parish a settlement belonged to around 1905, as well as the location of the civil registry office that issued records for that place after 1874. For the Austrian partition, another valuable resource is the Gescher Galicia website, which includes an index of Galician towns and villages and their associated parish churches. When trying to determine which parish church a place belonged to before the late 19th century, there are no comprehensive sources. However, it is useful to check when the parish mentioned in the late 19th century Gazetteer was established. If it was founded, for example, in 1834, there's a good chance your village was part of that parish from the beginning. Alternatively, you can visit the websites of current parish churches, as they often include historical information about the parish and may contain which church previously served the area.
I might mention that all of those are available on the PGSA website. And when we get to question 15, I'm going to elaborate a little bit more on these types of things on our site. But moving onward to question 12. How can researchers outside Poland determine whether records for a specific town or parish are digitized or only available on site? And how can I locate vital records that are not available online?
Okay, so on the screen, you can see a list of all the most important sites that upload scans or indexes of vital records. To determine whether records are available online, you should simply visit these websites and check whether they have anything of interest to you. We don't have enough time to show how to navigate them, but our Genealogy Academy videos cover most of them, and the PGSA website also has some guides on how to use them. If no scans or indexes are available for the parish church or registry office of your interest on these sites, you should first learn where the records from that church or office are stored. From the list, Szukaj w archiwach will provide you with information on whether the records are stored in any of the state archives. The availability of records in some of the church archives is also mentioned there. Genetica is also useful. If there are indexes there, then there is always information on where the records are stored. Church archives have their own inventories on their website, but some of them don't have any at all. In this case, Family Search is often useful as many records from Polish church archives have been microfilmed there. If the records are not stored either in the state archives or in local church archives, then they will be stored in the parish church, to which you could write an email. The youngest records are stored in the mentioned registry offices, to which you could also write. If the records are not available in any of these four types of institutions, then they most likely don't exist or could be stored in a different country, which can be the case for places that are not now within Poland's borders or weren't a part of Poland before World War II. In very rare cases, records are stored in local libraries, but I've seen maybe two such cases. If you have located where the records are stored, but no digital copies are available online, and you are interested in extended research rather than single copies, you will need to either visit the archives in person, or you could hire us to conduct the research on your behalf.
And again, those items that he listed are on our website. And the final question in this section relates to what he mentioned about areas that were not part of Poland today. How accessible are records in Belarus, Lithuania, and Ukraine? How do I go about researching information in these areas, particularly the Lviv area that is now part of Ukraine? And how much of this research can be done remotely from the US? And of course, how do shifting borders and administrative changes affect where records are stored?
Okay, so the situation in each of these countries is of course different, but some sources cover places in all three of them. The first is Archiwum Główne Akt Dawnych, the Central Archives of Historical Records, which is one of the state archives in Warsaw. It holds records from territories formerly under Polish administration, including Western Ukraine, Western Belarus, or the Vilnius region of Lithuania. It has many vital records scanned and available on its website. The site is only in Polish, but automatic translation should be sufficient. You can see the link on the screen. The records are divided by religion and by the archdiocese or diocese to which a place belonged. Therefore, it can take some time to find the locality you are interested in, but places are listed alphabetically at the beginning of each page, so it should not take too long. These records are, of course, fragmented, as some were destroyed or lost before being moved to Poland after World War II. You can find many vital records from Lviv or Lviv there as well, although you need to remember that it was a large city and there were multiple parish churches there. So if you don't know which one your ancestor attended, you might need to go through records of multiple churches. Another website familiar to many of you is Family Search, which hosts genealogical records for all three countries. Lithuania's records are the most digitized and often include full image access, while Belarus and Ukraine have a mix of indexed entries and partially scanned collections. As is often the case with Family Search, some image sets require viewing at family history centers. The Lithuanian archives also have their own website, Epaveldas, where they upload scans of vital records. It is quite difficult to navigate even with the English version. To use the search engine, you must enter the location name in the genitive case. typing the standard form of the name will yield no results. So without knowing Lithuanian, it will be challenging. You also need to type in Lithuanian the category of vital records you are looking for. So gimimo for births, santuokos for marriages, and mirties for deaths. You also need to add RKB to search for Roman Catholic records. So for example, to search for birth records from Vilnius, you should type gimimo Vilniaus RKB. There are some guides online explaining how to use the site, so it is best to search for those before trying on your own. Many of the same records may be accessible through family search, or you can email the Lithuanian archives and ask for a direct link to the scanned copies on Epavelda's website. When it comes to Ukraine, since the beginning of the full-scale Russian invasion, Ukraine archives have been very active in digitizing their materials, hiring the Family Search Organization and LDS staff to help. More than 30 million scans had been taken from 2022 to the end of 2024. As a result of this cooperation, many scans are available through Family Search, either online or at family history centers. There are also scans of vital records accessible on the websites of specific archives, but navigating them can be difficult if you cannot read the Cyrillic alphabet, although automatic translation of the website can also help. With patience, it is still possible though. On the screen, you can see links to some of the vital records uploaded to the websites of the Lviv and Rivne archives. Regarding scans from Belarus, I'm not aware of any official websites with uploads yet, but the goal is to complete 2 million scans by the end of this year. For now, I recommend using hobbyist websites such as Żniwo or Radzimo, which offer useful guidance for conducting genealogical research in Belarus. Also, be sure to check Family Search and the Central Archives of Historical Records in Warsaw, as mentioned earlier. All of this concerns vital records only. Researching other types of sources will require sending inquiries to the archives, visiting them in person, or hiring us or other genealogy company to do the research for you. Regarding the border changes, as you can see, there are no specific rules when it comes to Eastern territories. Some documents were moved to Poland, while others stayed in the former Soviet Union countries. The same goes for territories taken from Germany after World War II. In some cases, Germans took all the records with them or took the originals and the duplicate stayed. But there is no specific pattern here. Each case was different and needs to be analyzed individually.
Yeah, it can be very complicated in those countries. With my Polish-Lithuanian roots as well, that site is very difficult to navigate, particularly when you have to do so much in Lithuanian, and its grammar is even more complex than Polish. You also, in many of these cases, you'll find you need to find the fond, F-O-N-D, which when you do a translation usually gets translated as fund, but it comes from the Latin fons, meaning spring or headwaters, and essentially figuratively it means source. So a lot of times on these indexes, you have to go through a whole list of things and find something that looks similar, and then you have to try and find fond number 1643 or something. So it can be quite difficult, but give it a shot. It doesn't hurt to try. Okay, our third section, locating places. What mapping or gazetteer tools help pinpoint ancestral locations, and how can I use maps to trace ancestral places as well?
Okay, we've already discussed gazetteers, so let's now turn our attention to mapping tools. My favorite resource is Mapa Shukatel. This Polish online mapping service combines a geographic search engine with a database of towns, villages, and administrative divisions. It's particularly effective for identifying small localities and understanding their modern administrative affiliations. Also, the places that were independent localities in previous centuries but have eventually been incorporated into other towns and villages later on are still shown there separately. One of the website's most useful features is its search engine. When you enter a place name and click search, it shows you all locations in Poland with that name, unlike Google Maps, for example, which shows only a single result. Also, if you're uncertain about the correct spelling, you can type just the first three letters of the name into the search engine, and it will show you a list of every place in Poland beginning with those three letters. This feature is especially valuable when working with records such as ship manifests, where town names are often misspelled or difficult to read. The site does have one limitation. It can display only up to 50 locations with the same name at once. If your search returns more than that, you can use the advanced search option to narrow results by province, by województwo. Although the website is in Polish, it's pretty straightforward to use. After a little practice, the interface has only a few options, so navigating shouldn't be a problem, even for non-Polish speakers. I know that the PGSA also has some guides on their website, website on how to use this site. Another helpful resource is Mapire. However, we use it more for historical context rather than for active research. Mapire presents detailed maps of Europe from the 18th and 19th centuries, allowing you to see what your ancestral villages looked like centuries ago. A good source for historical maps is also Atlas Fontium, an online historical map viewer created by the Institute of History of the Polish Academy of Sciences. It allows users to compare modern maps with digitized historical map layers from various periods of Polish history. The site helps visualize how borders, settlements, and landscapes have changed over time and includes Polish, German, Russian, and Austrian maps. Uh, Finally, another useful tool is the Nazwiska Polskie website, which shows the modern distribution of surnames in Poland. It tells you how many people with a specific surname live in the country today and how many live in each location. From our experience and from our tours, this site is pretty accurate. It can help you identify the place your ancestors came from. If people with your surname still live there today, it can also help you resolve any spelling issues related to your ancestral place or surname.
Okay, moving along with this topic, how can I determine which specific town or village my ancestors came from, and how do I confirm it in historical records, considering place names often repeat or change spelling?
Okay, so to learn where your ancestors came from, most of the research will need to be done using documents on the American side, especially for those ancestors, of course, who were born in Poland but immigrated to the United States. You should start by obtaining their records in the US, such as their death records, and if they were married in the US, their marriage records as well. As I've said earlier, it's best to get both civil and church copies of these records. Church records can be harder to access as you need to know which church they attended, but they often contain more detailed information. And I have seen cases where a church marriage record proved crucial in identifying an ancestor's birthplace and moving the research forward. Other useful sources include naturalization records, which often list a person's birthplace. Census records can help establish family connections among household members, although they typically do not provide a specific birthplace. If they were taken before Poland regained independence, some US censuses often indicate which partition of Poland your ancestors came from, which can significantly narrow your search. Ship manifests, of course, are also extremely valuable using databases such as Ancestry, Family Search, or Ellis Island. You can locate passenger lists for the ships your ancestors arrived on. These manifests usually know the person last resident in Europe and sometimes include the location of relatives who remained in Poland. In addition, of course, to review any documents you or your relatives may have at home, such as letters, family Bibles, or old photographs, and or old envelopes with addresses. If possible, interview your oldest living relatives. Even small details they recall can provide valuable leads. If possible, check Polish databases to see if there are any indexes of your family records there. These could greatly help in confirming the location. With the exception of areas that were outside Poland's borders before 1945 or were annexed by the Soviet Union after World War II, most names of the places have remained the same since the 19th century. Some minor spelling differences may appear due to changes in orthography, but that's about it. Once you have possible names of towns or villages, compare them with historical gazetteers or mapping tools, and then search for corresponding records in Poland using the databases and websites mentioned earlier.
I'm sure you notice Alexander has mentioned and stressed a couple of times the importance of really trying to exhaust all possible records in the United States. Regard to this question, a good example that was helpful to me, and I know some other people, is that some of the priests in some of the Polish churches, particularly here in Chicago where I live, in the marriage record to document that the husband and wife, the bride and the groom, were baptized Catholics, would include in the marriage record where they were baptized in Poland. And so it gave me the town and the parish in the village. So you can never
Exactly,
tell
and
what
this is
these.
yeah,
Go ahead.
exactly, and this is something you will not have in a civil copy of the
Right,
marriage
right.
record.
It's only going to be in a church copy. So just another way of stressing, try and find every possible record here that might lead you in some way with some hint back to the old country. Also, I'd like to make mention that if you go to our website under the Research Sources tab at the top, there's a section called Geography. And among its subsections, there are links to 35 map collections, 18 village search and 13 parish search aids, plus 23 gazetteers for Poland, Lithuania, Austria, Hungary, and Ukraine, and more coming. And sometimes people out there, our members will say, hey, I found this and I don't see it on your website. We're always putting new things out there. So there's a wealth of information, and anything that new goes on shows up in the news and update section. So refer to that every month or something and see what new is there and how it might apply to you. Okay, how back in time can researchers reasonably expect to trace Polish ancestors using available sources?
In the majority of cases, assuming records haven't been destroyed or lost in any of the wars, you should be able to trace your lineage back to the late or mid 18th century. We need to keep in mind that back then, vital records were maintained exclusively by religious institutions, as I mentioned, as civil registration was introduced only much later. In theory, parish churches were required to keep vital records as early as the mid 16th century by the Council of Trent. However, many parishes began record keeping decades later or not at all. These early registers were typically stored in wooden churches or rectories where they were easily damaged by dampness, insects, or fire. In addition, wars and invasions during the 17th and 18th centuries destroyed countless parish archives across Poland. Because duplicate copies of registers were not made until the late 18th century, once a record was lost, it was gone forever. Also, as I've said, many churches did not really observe the church regulations imposed on them to keep the records. So at the end of the 18th century, the new occupying powers required parishes to keep records for civil registry purposes, so the system was more standardized. This system was introduced in the Austrian partition in 1782, in Prussia in 1794, and in the Duchy of Warsaw in 1808. The duchy later became the Kingdom of Poland, roughly corresponding to the Russian partition within today's Polish borders. These regulations greatly improve the survival rate of records from that period onward. There are, of course, cases in which older parish records dating to the early 18th century or further have survived. However, it is worth noting that the older the records, the less information they usually contain. For example, marriage records from the 18th century often did not provide the names of the newlyweds' parents. Even if no records exist, for example, from before 1785, obtaining a record from that year can still provide information about earlier generations, for example, the names of parents in a baptism record, of course. Noble families in Poland can often be traced further than that because of their legal status, which require detailed documentation. They appear in many types of records, including land files, court books, and confirmations of nobility that stretch back centuries. Nobles also tended to preserve family papers, making their genealogical trails much longer and clearer. They also owed land, so obviously there's more documentation, and they had more stable surnames, so there's less confusion there. Uh, there are also other valuable sources that can help extend your research beyond parish records, and we'll explore these in the next questions.
And we are moving to the final section. We have 3 questions here. The first of which is in the section called Overcoming Research Gaps. Are there strategies or backup sources for when records are unavailable that do not exist on sources such as Family Search or appear to be lost?
Yes, so when records are unavailable online or presumed lost, researchers should adapt several alternative strategies. First, verify whether the records truly don't exist by checking multiple websites, databases, and archives. Do not rely solely on Family Search or any single digital platform. There are various different websites that contain records unavailable elsewhere, as mentioned earlier. Therefore, it is essential to confirm that you have consulted all possible sources before concluding that the records no longer exist. Many records are stored in parish churches which don't have any inventories available online. So until you contact a parish church and ask them whether they have the records, you will not know for sure that these records don't exist. Sometimes it is worth exploring neighboring parishes as families moved or used nearby churches for baptism, marriages, or burials. Sometimes the best information comes from within the family itself. Relatives in Poland often have details, documents, or memories that aren't preserved in any archive, so finding them could also lead to a breakthrough in your research. Conducting DNA tests might help you to learn more about your family and find DNA matches for people who could know more. And of course, there are many additional types of sources other than vital records that will be discussed in the next question.
If parish registers are missing or incomplete, what other sources can be used to fill the gaps? And how useful are land and property records for genealogy research? And I guess we could even add notary records to that.
Yes, and this is a very broad subject, of course, one we could easily spend a couple of hours discussing, but I'll try to talk about it briefly. If we assume that no vital records survived at all, there are still other sources that can be used, although their availability depends on both the time period and the specific location. In general, the more recent the time and the larger the place, the greater the likelihood of finding supplementary records. For instance, there will usually be more surviving records from a large city in the 1920s than from a small village in the 1820s. There are exceptions, of course. Many Warsaw records were destroyed during the city's destruction after the Warsaw Uprising. These sources can be divided by historical period. Different kinds of documents exist from the Second Polish Republic, the partition period, and the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Moreover, each partition produced distinct record types. The Austrian partition, for example, generated documents that did not exist in the Russian partition and vice versa. Listing them all would take considerable time, so let's briefly outline the main categories. A valuable group of materials are residence records, such as resident registration cards, population books, books of permanent residence, and police residence files. For example, in the Russian partition, books of permanent residence were introduced in the 1870s and continued to be used into the 1930s during the Second Polish Republic. These records typically list all individuals living in a given household, including their full names, parents' names, place of birth, civil and social status, and religion. Similar registration materials exist from both the partition period and the interwar years. Another source are land and property records, which are very important. Depending on the region and period, these include tax lists, mortgage and land registers, and notarial deeds documenting property transactions. In the Prussian partition, the Grundbucher land registers were used. In the Russian partition, Revizskie Skaski revision lists documented land grants after the abolition of serfdom. In the Austrian partition, land surveys and cadastral maps recorded village layouts and landholders' ownership information, allowing researchers today to pinpoint the locations of ancestral properties on modern maps and learn how much land or livestock their ancestors owned. From the pre-partition period, noble estate inventories are particularly valuable. These often list peasants, tenants, servants, and estate managers who lived on a property, who owned the land or leased the land, and what their social and economic status was. They sometimes include family connections, neighboring households, and ownership changes that link generations. We have a detailed article series about such inventories by our researcher and guide, Piotr Zelny, available on our website. You can see a link on the slide. Beyond residence and land records, additional sources include tax lists, court documents, and employment files. Most of these supplementary records are held in local state archives. If you are unsure where or how to search, first check the Szukaj w Archiwach website for such records simply by typing the name of the place that interests you and seeing what comes up. If you are unsure about the availability, you can contact the relevant archives and ask what materials might help you with your research, especially that sometimes the search engine might not come up with everything that is available. Of course, there is never a guarantee that such records survived or even ever existed for your ancestral place. Each case is very different and depends on the time period and the place. So there is rarely a guarantee that there is a set list of alternative sources you can research as a backup source for vital records. So you simply need to find out what is available.
And our final question kind of wraps everything together in many ways. What kinds of local histories, gazetteers, or other resources might provide helpful background?
Okay, so I've already mentioned Słownik Geograficzny Królestwa Polskiego, the 19th century Gazetteer, which remains one of the best online resources for learning about the social and economic condition of places during that period. However, it is available only in Polish and uses many archaic terms and abbreviations, so it could be difficult to translate. Not every town or village has an extensive entry there. Some consist only of a few sentences. In such cases, it is often helpful to consult the entry for the commune, the gmina, or county, powiat, seat to which the locality belonged, as these often provide valuable background on the region's character, economy, and history. It is also worth visiting the official websites of communes and counties, which often include sections dedicated to local history. The same applies to the website websites of parish churches connected to your ancestors. These sites can be extremely valuable for anyone researching regional history in Poland. So gmina websites, which represent the smallest administrative units, frequently contain short histories of the villages they govern. These summaries describe when settlements were founded, how they developed over time, and what events or industries shaped them. Some gmina offices even publish online versions of local chronicles or monographs, often prepared by teachers or local historians. Such narratives help trace patterns of population change, land ownership, and economic development, shedding light on how people in that area once lived. Powiat, county websites take a broader view, placing individual towns and villages within their regional context. They describe the political and economic development of the area, sometimes reaching back to the Middle Ages, and often include references to local museums, archives, and cultural institutions that could also be checked for more information. These resources document events such as wars, land reforms, and migrations that affected entire populations, not just individual localities. They also reveal how neighboring communities were connected through trade, education, and administration, offering a broader understanding of the forces that shaped family life. Parish church websites provide another valuable perspective rooted in religious and community history. Many parishes publish short histories of their churches, lists of former priests, and descriptions of construction or renovation projects. They often have summaries of the history of the parish, when it was established, how many churches there were, and the general history of the area. Even when parish websites do not host vital records directly, they usually note when the parish was founded and which villages it served. Key details that can clarify where earlier registers were kept. Historical maps are also valuable for understanding your ancestors' world. Viewing old maps through tools such as the mentioned Mapire or Atlas Fontium reveals how borders, towns, and parishes have shifted over time, placing your ancestors within their correct historical context. These maps show the geography, infrastructure, and settlement patterns that shaped daily life and local developments across the centuries. Finally, you can also search for old photographs and illustrations of ancestral towns and regions through digital archives such as Polona or Szukaj w archiwach. These collections provide a visual sense of the landscapes, architecture, and communities that once existed. Of course, the sources discussed here represent only those available online, which make up just a fraction of what is available. Many additional materials can be found in printed monographs, such as Robert mentioned, for example, to available for purchase on PGSA website, local histories and archival collections accessible only in libraries and regional repositories. So that would be it.
One thing I would add is Google the name of the town or village.
Yeah, and you can check Wikipedia page, for example, or
it's unless your village, there's 5, 10, 25 of them with the same name across Poland, which is very common, much more common, say, than Springfield in the United States, where we know there are several. Oftentimes,
you only
have
have several Springfields. I thought you had more than several.
We have a few, but not as many as some of the towns of
Okay,
Poland.
I imagine that there are dozens.
Yeah, you do Mapa, Shukatel, and the country of Poland is covered with all those circles. Well, that brings us to the end. First of all, the website will, in our video section, we will upload the entire, we've recorded this, and the entire presentation will be uploaded to that, along with its companions over the last number of years. We've got, I don't know, like 3 dozen or so out there. And I might add that there are some videos out there that address some of the specific areas that Alexander outlined. So they'll be able to provide a little bit more detail than we could with, 19 questions. And more than that, when you consider some of these questions were 2 or 3 parts. So there's a lot to be looked at out there. PGSA probably has the broadest and deepest and best growing website of support, among the Polish Genealogical Society. So, and again, anything that you might find that isn't out there, we're happy to consider putting it up. So finally, Alexander, thank you very much for a superb presentation, an excellent outline. I will also put this PowerPoint out on the site so that people can refer to it quickly without having to scan through the video. I would like to add that, Polish Origins is a longtime, very close partner of ours. They've done specialized tours for us. Regrettably, that was interrupted by COVID. I've gotten many reports from our members and even non-members who've worked with them at a distance for research, as well as their custom designed personal tours that took individuals and families to their ancestral villages and archives. So I thank Polish Origins in general for all the help you've provided us in our membership. And once again, Alexander, dziękuję bardzo for an excellent presentation. We do have, I do see a few questions have come in, and we'll be getting those to Alexander.
Yes, this is what I also wanted to mention at the end, that there were some questions that did not make the deadline, and Robert already sent them to me, so I will reply to them within the next week, most likely. And we also are gathering questions through the chat, so those will be sent to me as well. And if you haven't sent any question and you would like something clarified, if something was unclear in the presentation, you can also contact us at the email address mentioned on the slide, and I will be happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
Okay, great. Thanks. And may everyone have a great holiday season and all the best searching and researching and getting great results in the upcoming new year.
Thank you, everyone.
Perfect. Thank you.